Mr. Bukhari, before we talk about some of the informational problems that the United Nations faces in this new year, could you tell us, do you actually get as much satisfaction out of being a servant of the 76 nations as you did being the chief delegate of your native Pakistan?
Yes, I get as much satisfaction because I think I get at least as much education. And I think it's a different kind of education, but it's just as satisfying.
But of course you were regarded as one of the most brilliant executors of policy by many of the correspondents here. Do you feel any frustration in not being able to express yourself on political questions as you did before?
No, I was never a compulsive talker.
Well, as head of the information service here now at the United Nations, tell me, do you think some of the misunderstandings that did exist about the United Nations during its first 10 years are being removed or have been removed?
I think they have been removed. For example, I think that the idea is now definitely dead that the United Nations is or is trying to be a world government or a super government. That caused many anxieties, but I think that that no longer is a source of fear or anxiety to many people. Also, I think the idea is now gradually taking root that the morality within the United Nations will be as good or as bad as the international morality which individual members bring to it. Of course, a large number of people who believe in the ideal picture of the United Nations and are idealists themselves have for a long time looked upon, or rather tend to look upon, the United Nations as a court. They think that whenever they have a complaint of some sort, some injustice, grievance, all they've got to do is to bring it to the United Nations, and they expect justice to be given to them. If, according to their own lights, they do not get justice, then they blame the United Nations. The real truth of the matter is that this is not a world court. Here are 60 or now 76 lawyers, if you like, without a judge. And these lawyers have themselves to constitute themselves into a body of judges to pronounce on the issues before them. Those are some of the misunderstandings that have been removed, and people are being gradually educated to see the United Nations more realistically. If that's enough for you, I will stop there. Although
I would like to ask you this, though, Mr. Bukhari. Do you feel that if the United Nations is not a super government, as we know it isn't, much less a world government, is it a world parliament? There are a lot of words been used to describe it, a town meeting of the world. What is it if it's not any of these?
Well, of course, everybody has his own connotation of parliament and town meeting and their own associations. But I think at the present moment, the biggest psychological difficulty that people face is the following. On the one hand, they believe in the United Nations as the ideal body which is to be the great source of international morality and justice and peace in the world. On the other hand, in the day-to-day proceedings, they see that many decisions are taken not as a result of some absolute principles, but as a result of adjustment and mutual interests. They somehow find it difficult to reconcile such a very realistic situation, which they regard sometimes as cynical, with the ideal picture which the preamble represents to them. But I think gradually, as political education, especially in the international sphere, increases in the world, as it is every day, people have begun to realize that there is nothing irreconcilable between the two. You can have an ideal and also find yourself falling short of it every now and then. But the only way not to fall short is to keep on to the ideal. The more you believe in it, the less likely you are to fall short. And the less you believe in it, the more likely you are to lag behind. Therefore, this United Nations sets up a virtuous circle. You come here with your own interests, but you must also come with a constructive frame of mind, with the with the attitude of looking at other people's difficulties from an absolute point of view. And thus we hope that the international forum, as it is at the present moment, will gradually approach its own ideals.
In other words, it's a permanent conference that has an ideal set up in front of it, but the realism of the situations often make it fall short of that ideal. But you feel that people should realize that it's only human like themselves?
No, they should realize, of course it's human like themselves, but they should realize that just as individual and community morality has gradually grown, there is a much greater, for example, notion of social morality now than there was, say, 2 centuries ago in many communities. Just as that has grown, international morality has to grow from the adjustment of mutual interests on smaller scales to bigger and bigger scales. That's all. And I think that if they keep that in mind, they will find that the disappointments they feel are natural, but on the other hand, it is all the more necessary to hold on to the ideal.
Well, Professor Bukhari, perhaps the greatest disappointment at the United Nations that many people feel, and I don't think they've ever recovered from it, is that they had a conception of the United Nations when it was first chartered 10 years ago, a conception of peace and justice in one world, and now we seem to be confronted by irreconcilables of systems of government within the United Nations. Now, has the admission of the 16 new nations done anything to correct these internal divisions, or has the United Nations expanded from 60 to 76 nations along the old lines of division?
Well, I'm afraid I do not think so little of the old lines, Mr. LeSueur, as you seem to do. I think that even along the old lines, it was a good thing. It was an achievement for people of different outlooks to sit together and be discussing, even though they discussed matters rather heatedly at times and harshly at other times. But the expansion from 60 to 76 is not only a quantitative expansion, I think it is bound to be a qualitative expansion. It means that not only that more and more countries are joining this great forum, where their actions are exposed to the scrutiny and the gaze of the common man. They have to render account of their actions to everybody in the world. They have to come into contact with people whom they have never known before. Not only that, but it means that more and more problems of the world, more and more sources of friction and collision are bound to figure in the agenda of the United Nations. And I think not only will the membership increase, but I think, if I may hazard a guess, that the agenda will become heavier and heavier as time goes on. In other words, this body, in other words, the 76 nations jointly will take up more responsibility for the welfare of the world than they have done before.
And the sessions may go on longer, but that interests me. You do feel that there will be many more nations joining the UN, perhaps nations that we are not only excluded now, but nations that we haven't heard of before, new formations?
Well, I think that when one sees the excellent progress towards self-determination and the national self-realization of the peoples in, say, Africa, when one realizes that, one is bound to feel that in a decade or two, earlier perhaps, later perhaps, new nations will be born.
May I ask you this, Professor Bukhari? Each nation that has become a member of the United Nations does have a national quota, I believe, of people that it can employ here. Now, with the admission of 16 new nations, will that mean that your quotas of employment will have to be increased here, and will the budgets be increased automatically to take care of that?
But you know that now you are taking me very much out of my depth. I don't think, first of all, that each nation has a quota. I think there is some provision about adequate regional representation, the overriding principle still being of the qualifications of people employed. But whether the Secretariat expands or doesn't expand, number one, will depend on the requirements that the Secretariat will have to face with the new members. These are being studied at the moment, and the only man who can give you a total picture in time would be the Secretary General. And secondly, I think that how much it expands depends also on the budget, doesn't it? And the budget is sanctioned by the General Assembly.
Yeah, but of course the 60 new nations will be expected to pay their share. But are these problems of the expansion of the United Nations occupying a great deal of your time in this new year?
Oh yes, I mean, as a matter of fact, it is our duty, and I think the whole of the Secretariat at the moment is busy. Has been busy for some time, ever since the new members were admitted, to looking at the implications of the new membership and the requirements in order that they should be able to serve the 76 member nations at least as much as they used to be able to serve the 60 member nations.
Professor Bukhari, I wanted to ask you this too. Do you think that, since you are head of the Information Service, that people throughout the world accept the United Nations now as a living, essential organization, or must it still be defended in its very existence?
I don't think it needs defense. For example, I think a very good sign is the fact that more and more countries have, during the last 10 years, or during the last 7 years or so, been wanting to become members. I don't know of any that seriously wanted to cease being a member. That's a very happy sign. So that's so far as the governments are concerned. I think governments in this matter may be taken to be fairly representative of the people, but suppose you are a hair splitter and say, no, governments don't always represent people. Then I would point to a large number of very live non-governmental organizations that exist in practically all the countries of the world, whose purpose it is to promulgate the ideas and publicize the activities of the United Nations and to keep up its ideals. So that on the whole, I think the United Nations doesn't need a defense.
Well, Professor Bukhari, do you feel that under the concept of universality of the United Nations, in which all systems of government seem to be represented here now, do you feel that this is a satisfactory concept as we look ahead into the future? Do you think all systems should be represented here?
Mr. LeSueur, all systems, as far as I can see them, I mean, if you construct or concoct some monstrosities of which I've never heard, I can't at the moment promise that my answer will cover all those, but as far as I can see, realistically, the question, I'm not a political theorist, but governments I see around the world, I think I don't know of any that could not come in because of their form of government.
Well, I was thinking of the war that was fought in World War II and fascism, which was apparently a political organization to make war, and I wondered if you felt that countries with such a system would find a place for themselves within the United Nations.
I think a good answer is that hypothetical questions shouldn't be answered.
Well, Mr. Bukhari, I wonder if I could conclude our interview and ask you how you managed to keep the interest in the UN going now that the Assembly is out of session.
Oh, I mean, I see. I mean, how the newspapers are informed about the activities of the United Nations. Well, as you know, we have an all the year-round service of publications, of films, of photographs, of radio programs, of other visual material, of press releases that goes on regardless of the General Assembly. The General Assembly is one event in the year. It is a very important event, and it brings in so much news that I would not blame you if you don't want to see me at all for 3 or 4 months, because you get quite enough news from the Assembly sessions. But as you know, there's a lot of activity going on between sessions and all through the year. Long-range activities, economic activities that are going on, studies that are being made of human rights, celebrations of human rights, information about various projects that are in hand, which steadily go out.
Professor Bukhari, I wonder if you could answer a personal question. How does your budget for information compare with, we'll say, the budget for information for purely national states?
While you see some national states have no information on budget because they don't believe in it in principle, but the budget here is about 5 million, as you know, which you can say is too much, you can say is too little. Nobody has ever been able to decide or can decide how much you should spend on missionary work of some sort. And ours is purely informational work, missionary in the sense that we give all the information there is and hope that that in itself will endear the United Nations to people. We don't go out and preach anything. We have no doctrine apart from anything else. But we have a global clientele. Now you divide this money over the population of the world and see where it comes to. Therefore, you see, this has to be a token activity from this place. Our real hope is that the people and the governments who are as much interested in the United Nations, we are their servants. We are doing this a bit for them as a service to them because they have asked us to do this service. I work under a mandate from the General Assembly. It is their work. And we think that this is too little or too much according to the framework in which you think about this kind of work.
But thank you very much, Professor Bukhari. It's always a pleasure to hear your views on the world and the United Nations.